So basically they have two choices. They can work at Jack in the Box or, as hotel maids, or they can try to get private scholarships to get graduate degrees. And what you see happening with these kids is they're becoming very, very savvy political activists. And they're working very hard to get the DREAM Act passed and learning the system of political activism at the same time. One of the very, very interesting things about the DREAM Act that I learned from these kids that I interviewed who live in Phoenix is that when they cross into the United States, they can't speak English, but there is one language that they can speak, and they know it very well, and that is the language of mathematics, because numbers are the same in English and Spanish, right? So they become very, very good at math and science. So those who get scholarships, who get private scholarships, tend to go into math and science because that's where, as children, that's where their comfort zones were, going into American schools. So, yeah.
You partially answered my question, which I was going to ask. You are in a unique position, and I've been following the border problem for the last 60 years, and watched it go different ways. From the acts that they had and from the practice that they had, and also the American Graduate School of International Management wrote a report about 10, 15 years ago, which was very good. But I was going to ask you, if you had your dream of dreams and you were sitting there with a legislative plan, because the universe is telling us one thing by this pouring of people into different countries and across these artificial borders that we set up long ago. What would you say? And I know the DREAM Act sounded very good. I wasn't aware of it. And I was wondering who is behind that in the legislation, and does it, is there a party or is there a group or something that we could get behind?
The DREAM. I should tell you all that I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, and I'm really here to talk to you as an author and as a journalist and not as an activist. I should have said that at the outset. But I can say that the DREAM Act has a coalition, Arizona DREAM Act coalition in Arizona.
It's in Arizona?
They have it all over the country. And it's very big on social media. The kids who, it's really being run by the students themselves. And I'm having a brain cramp on who sponsored it.
Was it presented?
No, I'm talking about in Congress. But Luis Gutierrez, if you look, he's in the House, but he was very, very big on it, and he became, I think he went out and had himself arrested even with the students. Harry Reid was very big on the DREAM Act. It's introduced every single year, and every single year it's failed. The people who oppose it call it the DREAM nightmare, and say it's amnesty for illegals. There's a lot of stuff. If you get online, you'll see a lot of really hatred coming out against these kids who don't have any hate in them. Yeah, sure.
So broadening this out a bit, somebody mentioned about an approach to immigration.
Right.
Right now we've gone to, at least Arizona has, gone to this approach is make life as awful and terrible as you can for them and get them out of here. And so where they go, they get them out of here. Whether it's other parts of the States or whether it's back to Mexico, Obviously, I think most people in this room would not agree with that. Number one, it's not possible. You just can't get rid of hundreds of thousands of people just like that, many of whom are part and parcel of the economy of the state. So how would you deal with this? How would you, that's my first question. My second question is, how do you change the image? You know, people think, I mean, even the governor talks about these, you know, they're all druggies and they're all illegals and druggies go together. How do you change that image?
Well, what I did was tell true stories about people, about real people, but it's really important to understand that the issue of illegal immigration is a global issue. And we're experiencing one tiny sampling of it, and it is a result, many scholars believe, of globalization. These forces force, mass movements of people hither and thither. China has an illegal immigration problem. Because Vietnamese and North Koreans are going to China because they work for cheaper wages. And a lot of the resentment, I believe, against undocumented immigrants is based on, at least in the United States, is based on a certain demagoguery that is given credence because people are so dissatisfied and marginalized by what's happened to them in their own lives. I just came yesterday from Kansas, where many people lost their farms. Either they sold out to agribusiness or they lost their farms in bankruptcy. They don't have work anymore. The meat packing plants have been deunionized and bought up by big corporations in many cases. And so people can no longer afford to work at the meat packing plants, and in come the immigrants who will, live in a house with, 5 people in a room and work for very low wages. And there's a lot of resentment without, I think, an understanding by all of us of the larger picture. I have heard, so comprehensive immigration reform, which has failed, which is 4 tiers, which has 4 parts. That's border enforcement, workplace enforcement, a pathway to citizenship for the 10 million or 11 million already here who haven't committed felonies, and a workable, flexible visa program. That is probably a solution to the problem we have now, but again, this is a global issue, and I think that smarter minds than my poor little mind will have to figure out how to solve this problem globally, because we can solve it now and it'll be all right for a while, but then something else might happen. Right now, what we're looking at in the Arizona-Mexico immigration flow, we've had a lot of illegal immigration has slowed. It's gone way down with the economy. But one of the things that happened was that maquiladoras, which are factories in Mexico and on the border that create manufacturing goods for American factories and jeans and all sorts of different things. Those jobs were filled by Mexicans, and then the maquiladora jobs went to China with globalization. So as a result, you had all these immigrants massed on the border with no work. So the immigrants themselves are very often, their immigration is moved by forces not of their making. I mean, they just don't have a choice sometimes. The other thing that with immigration into the United States is that we are an older, more educated population, and we fill those jobs, and they have a less educated, younger population that fills other jobs. And the argument for this is that this actually grows the economy because the cheap labor at the bottom builds businesses, and then the businesses create other jobs for more skilled workers as they grow. That's one argument that's pretty well accepted by economists. So the bottom line is this is a global problem, and globalization is the issue.
But the other part of my question was about image. You know, this horrible image that people have of the drug use and so on. It's perpetuated by our present legislature.
Right.
And how?
It's not. It's actually the best thing that one can do, I think, is to read and to understand that a lot of what is said is just simply not true, and to counter it with rational, knowledge-based data, you know. For instance, the idea that immigrants, first-generation immigrants commit an overwhelming amount of crime, that's just not true. The border, you know, prison data indicates that first of all, you can't count who is an unauthorized immigrant and who... Hello? You can't, prisons don't count who is an unauthorized immigrant and who is an immigrant, just immigrant in the prison body. So to say that all these cop killers, unauthorized immigrants are, you know, crowding out our prisons and committing all these crimes is just simply not provable, A. And B, studies, a lot of studies that I wrote about in the Daily Beast and in stories I've written for New Times indicate that first-generation immigrants commit lower amounts of crime. They tend to be healthier than the general population, so they tend not to use hospitals as much as we think they do. Certainly there are elements of, you know, drug dealing. But let us not forget that we are all complicit in the fact that the drugs are going to Main Street. You know, I mean, I personally don't use drugs, but I don't want you to get that idea. But these drugs aren't just going into a vacuum. They are being purchased by American consumers. So there are deeper sociological issues, you know, at work here. There's somebody in the back who's been trying to...
Well, it's kind of connected to this and then to another question. The thing is, where do we get, you know, where to get that kind of logical, reasoned, actual, accurate fact data?
Okay.
That's one issue. And the other question I have had to do with image that you mentioned before. It's been confusing to me to know and hear that Arizona is considered, you know, with the 1070 and all the immigration stuff to be, you know, the image is so bad, you know, that companies are pulling out, tourism is pulling out, convention money is pulling out, that kind of thing.
Right.
While on the other hand, we have all these other states now trying to imitate Arizona. Those two things are
There's a disconnect.
Are a bizarre combination.
Yeah, there's a disconnect. There's so much that I could say. First of all, I don't think 1070 would have passed if Janet Napolitano had been governor. So there was a vacuum there. The second thing is that 1070 was passed because I think that it would have had a hard time passing if it had not been for the murder of Robert Krentz on the border. He was an Arizona rancher, and law enforcement authorities and everyone else seemed to say, you know, an unauthorized Mexican drug dealer shot him. And that scared the living daylights out of Arizonans. They thought that, you know, we have to do something to secure the border, and 1070 was passed in that rush of panic. Now, 1070 has nothing whatsoever, zip, nothing to do with border security. There's not a single word in 1070 that deals with border security. So,
But other states are trying.
Right, but what happened was they saw how popular the politicians who passed this, how they, you know, became very popular on Fox News, and they, you know, they got cachet, and other politicians hope to emulate that. I mean, that's my opinion. They hope to emulate, they hope to ride that wave to their own, you know, elections and popularity. Now, I will say that in Kansas, for instance, the author of Senate Bill 1070 is Chris Kobach. It's not Russell Pierce. It's Chris Kobach. He's a lawyer, Yale lawyer, who works for the immigration, well, he works for a nonprofit anti-illegal immigration group that is very strong in Washington. And he basically authored SB 1070.